First item I have on tonight's agenda is a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the Western Water Transmission Main Project with expense not to exceed $150,000. This is coming through the Water Pollution Committee. Mr. James.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I will yield some time to Stephen Wellstead to give us a little more detail on this. This is basically going to give us more opportunity to be more competitive when we look for businesses to move into that 33 corridor. Stephen, go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. Good evening, City Council. So yeah, as Tom said, this project kind of originates from our needs in the US 33 corridor area. We've done some modeling recently of the water distribution system, and it does show that the infrastructure we have in place, or will have in place by the end of this year, will be adequate to serve our water obligations in the 33 corridor area. But when we modeled scenarios with additional water users out in that area, we found that problems arose, which basically means we'll be at capacity and will not be able to utilize or provide water to large water users that may be interested in coming in the future. So what this project will do is we're going to look at scenarios and what infrastructure needs to be put in order to allow us to have that capacity and be open to serving potential future users in that area. And of course, this design contract will get the ball rolling on again getting that infrastructure designed so that we can move forward with that when necessary.
Questions for Mr. Wellstead? Mr. James, what's your timing?
2 readings, please.
Your second?
The second on that will be, I think, Becky.
All right, we'll go 2 readings on 5221. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Next item I have on tonight's agenda is Resolution 5321. That's a resolution to appropriate from the Water Fund 6003 to make a repair. This is coming through water pollution. Mr. James.
Yes, I'm going to invite Superintendent Nixon to explain this a little bit greater. There was a damage years ago, I think, done to a sanitary sewer, and in order to avoid excrement from getting all over 37 near Diamond Power, I think we needed to do this on an emergency basis. But go ahead, Mike.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of Finance. I explained this to the council last meeting with departmental updates that we had this situation. The water main loop was installed in 2012, and unfortunately it took until earlier this year for the problem to raise its ugly head, and it's because it's a pump station that only pumps periodically. So we finally received the bill from Pipeworks, and it's the amount of $9,272.76. And once we dug down, we did determine it was a result of that water main installation way back when. So if we could, I'd appreciate first reading suspension so we could process this voucher for payment to Pipeworks.
Questions for Mr. Nixon? No issues with suspension, I assume?
Yes, we would like to get suspension on this tonight.
All right, who's your second, please?
Norman Hall.
All right, we will suspend on 5120 Hall with Mr. 21 with Mr. Hall as the second. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mike. Next item I have is Resolution 5421. That's a resolution to create new funds for the federal local fiscal recovery revenue and expense accounts, which will now be Fund 2052. Auditor Nettles.
Yes, this is the new recovery monies that were anticipated to receive, and per Auditor State Bulletin, I'm required to set up a separate fund to manage those monies, those federal dollars. So this is just setting up that fund, and hopefully on next meeting, we'll get with the mayor and set up a revenue and expense budget, so I'll have another piece that affects this to set up.
Do you have any? Do we need to suspend on this tonight?
If you wouldn't mind suspending, that way I can have it set up, because I'm not unsure yet. I'm hopeful we'll get the money in there, but I'm not unsure. I didn't know when exactly they're going to release it.
Okay. Questions for the auditor? We will ask for suspension to get those funds set up. Christina, will you be the second on that, please?
Yes.
Very good, thank you, Auditor Nettles. So we will go suspension on 5421. Next item I have on tonight's agenda is Resolution 5721. That's a resolution to approve an enterprise zone agreement with Blue Label Packaging Company. Who wants to talk about this? The Service Safety Director, the Mayor, the Law Director?
I can talk about it.
Sure.
The location of Blue Label is not in one of our CRA areas. However, they are in the enterprise zone area that the county controls. And Blue Label continues to expand out there. They were originally strongly considering moving their new administrative headquarters outside the city, somewhere north. But thanks to a lot of hard work, they are now going to build it at their location out on 37. So this is the typical agreement. I think we've approved one of these about a year ago for the last expansion they did, allowing a real estate tax exemption. And it actually runs through the county commissioners, but since they're inside the city, we have to act on it also, just acknowledging that we're aware of it.
Okay. Any questions for the mayor on this? It's a 15-year exemption of the new property taxes that would have been collected. And I believe they also have approval from the local school district as well,
Right.
which is required.
Mhm.
And that's basically adding 30 jobs at a payroll of $1.5 million annually. So these are good things when we get to do these. What's our timing on this? Is there any rush?
I'm not aware of any timing.
I think we can definitely have first reading tonight, because I think they're looking at construction.
Yeah, probably at least two, I would guess. So in the meantime, I'll see if I can find out.
I'll tell you, well, let's plan for 2. If you find out that we need to move quicker, we'll do that. And Mrs. Bobbitt, will you second this, please?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so we'll plan for 2 readings, and if we need to move a little quicker to, has the county approved this yet, or do we have to go
Yeah,
first?
it came from the county,
Okay,
yes.
okay. So we're the last people that need to approve it? Okay. So we will go 2 readings unless we're indicated we need to go to suspension. All right. So 2 readings on 5721. Next item I have on tonight's agenda are departmental updates. Assistant Chief Maffin, I have you on there first if you'd like to step to the podium.
All right, thank you. So we are ready to move on ordering the next new medic we usually do a 3-year replacement cycle, and ordering a medic now will put us on track to take delivery probably about this time in 2022, which will give us our 3 years. We've got the build specs updated, and the committees, our in-house committees, done all the work they needed to do on that. I've got the contract laying on my desk ready to sign. I just wanted to make everybody aware that legislation will probably come for that for the next council meeting.
What's the cost?
Total one I'm going to ask for is $350,000. The truck itself is just shy of $282, but that will also account for the $47,000 cot, and then we have a lot of other equipment that normally would come off of the truck that's going out of service and be put on this one, but since we are looking to put a 4th medic in service in another year, with this truck build, we need to just buy everything. Buy the kits that go in the back of the truck, the newer radio system, hand tools, everything that we would typically stock on this truck.
So is that the same kind of power cot that we have currently?
Yes,
Okay. How are those things working out? It's been 5, 6, 7, 8 years?
great. I mean, they are, if we would have had these 25 years ago, I probably wouldn't have had back surgery.
Oh, wow.
It's saving a lot we had some guys when we first got them that were totally against it just because of the way it caught itself, but everybody loves it. It is probably one of the best, fairly big dollar purchases that this department's ever made.
Nice. Questions for Assistant Chief Maffin?
I can attest that they work, that this is a worthwhile expense.
Was it comfortable?
I don't really remember it.
Well,
We try not to make the cod itself too comfortable, because then nobody wants to get off of it. They
Yeah.
just want to hang on with us.
Well, at least you took care of Mr. Hull, so, all right, so, this does take a while. I mean, the build process takes a while, and then certainly to your point where we need to obviously outfit the entire fourth medic. I am suggesting that we pay for this through, the, general fund or operating funds, not through the fire impact fees. This is a legitimate expense because we're buying one of these every 3 years now. So we should look at noting this. Now, we don't need to note the, the extra pieces parts, but the medic itself, we should, kind of look on a 5-year schedule.
I'll get with Assistant Chief, find out exactly the dollar value that's needed, and then we'll contact to get legislation in here for
Okay.
the master lease.
Perfect.
That's a good plan. Take the components off and just finance the medic itself, so.
Yep, very good. All right. Seeing no questions, very good. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate the update. Further departmental updates? Yes, Mr.
So
Martin.
wildfire was up there, but I just want to let you know that we are planning on bringing the city budget. I know Auditor Nettles mentioned something tonight about hers, but we need to adjust the police department, fire department's budget to encompass not only what we settled in the contract for salaries, but we're ready to try to start moving forward with even increasing in our employee staff. Hiring is going pretty good, but if you recall, when we finished out last year, we just took that kind of lower number. It's not the number that we would like to achieve and get to. So just to give you an anticipation for that number, we have another test going out for fire, and we're getting over 80 applicants this time, and we're still now moving forward with some good applicants for police department as well. So we'd like to bring in the overall budget. Maybe we'll incorporate it with what Auditor Nettles made on some of her changes as well to reflect that, but that'll be next week.
Well, I know you have a lot of other things out there, right? You got other contract, I mean, do we just want to wait until we get everything cleared up and bring in one correcting piece? Or, I mean, I know, because we actually have funding, I mean, the budget will continue to fund operations even as you add people, but, I mean, if we need to do it sooner than later, great, I have no problem with that. I'm just looking for, passing the changes, all at once. If that's not doable, I'm okay with that.
So I would like to move it forward next week because we're reaching the limits right now at fire where we have budgeted for 67. But I would like to make some more offers. And I'd like to have that on the books of those offers. I'm far away from that on police. We could probably wait longer on the police side. We're in a standstill right now on some of the other contracts that we're negotiating right now. And I really cannot give you a time frame when that'll be settled. But that was my ultimate goal, Councilman Stoughton, is to bring it all in at one time.
Well, no, I mean, you have appropriated monies.
Okay.
You have 12 months for appropriated money, all right? It's not like you're gonna run out, but that's okay. If you want to bring it in, I'm fine
Well,
with that.
I guess what I'm looking at is, I'm really big about council being understanding
Sure.
of the amount of employees that we want to hire.
Yeah.
Our goal to get to fire is 84, and police, we'd like to get to 72, making sure we're on the same page. If you're okay with that, I will definitely consider that. I just want to make sure, if I have consensus here, that, yes, we have the funding to pay for that. We will not be able to go months for fire, just to let you know. So we'll try to see if you're okay with that. I'll be glad to delay that.
I'll let you do it the way you want to do it. I'm just trying to prevent a
Yeah.
bunch of legislation having to come through.
But I agree with that. I understand that.
So, anyone have any questions about that? Obviously, this is the reason for the tax increase, and the voters passed that. They want the fourth medic, they want additional police officers, so this certainly is right in line with the planning. Okay, we'll see, no questions. We will move on to Denise.
Good evening. As we move forward with the various improvements in the US 33 corridor, today Ohio EPA issued a public notice on our wastewater plant permit. Because we're doubling the size of the Upper Hocking wastewater plant, we had to go through an anti-degradation review to get new permits. And it's just a review that says, no, we're not going to harm the water quality in the Hocking River. They issued that today for public comment. There's a 30-day public comment period. So if anyone has comments on the anti-degradation or the permit, they can submit those to Ohio EPA, and you will find that information on the city website on the upper Hocking page.
Okay, questions for Denise?
Fascinating subject, I know.
I know, clearly. Very good.
Denise, if you were to, over, under, how many comments you think you're going to get, what's that look like?
I don't think we'll get any comments.
Exactly, that's what I thought too, yeah. So, but if people want to, it's out there.
Right.
Yeah, all right.
Mr. Nixon.
I want to give everybody a little update on our filter rebuild. I came to council and requested a little over $180,000 to rebuild a filter, and told you at that time we were reevaluating to see if we could change the scope. Last week, they finished getting the material out of the second filter, and we started rebuilding the filters at the end of last week, and they'll be delivering the sand and gravel later this week and hoping to place it. So the good news is we're going to have those two filters rebuilt for a little less than the 180. So we'll have both filters back in service. So that worked out very well. We'll have about 240 in them because we had 70,000 from the year before cleaning out one filter, and I'm soliciting a price to do one more filter because it's making us all nervous, and we ought to be in pretty good shape for a while with having filters done. And it looks like right now it's going to be about 115. So I'll be looking at revenue throughout the year, and if I think the revenue will support it, I'll bring legislation to do the additional filter. If I don't think our revenue will support it, we'll have to defer until next year unless it goes bad on us. But I did want you to know that we were successful in getting two filters rebuilt for the price of that one.
Well, that's all well and good, but you have 4 plants, so which plant we talking about?
This is the Miller Park.
Gotcha, okay.
Miller Park.
All right, I didn't
We're
remember
north.
what.
We're
what
trying
they-
to call it the North Water Plant now, rather than
Oh,
Miller
okay.
Park, so.
Questions for Mr. Nixon? Very good, thank you, sir. Further updates?
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to
Announce who you are.
sound my drum. City Engineer, Mitch Noland. I know I've talked to you guys multiple times about the Edie Road project. I'm going to talk to you once again. We have had pre-construction meetings with Shelley Company and some of their subcontractors. It's on the cusp of starting. You're actually going to see some activity out there tomorrow. The actual probably closure is going to happen towards the end of May, beginning of June, and that's when traffic is going to get interesting out there. So I'm just giving you guys a heads up. We'll put out some things. Mayor will put some things out on Facebook, but I also know that the Timber Top subdivision, which is just right down the road, there's turn lanes that need to be built there, which will be maintenance of traffic type things that will happen along that part of the road as well. And just on the other side, there's a small little commercial development happening next to, like a little further down from the Shell's gas station, Thomas Commercial Building. So there's going to be activity alongside the road at that location as well. So North Columbus Street is going to be a busy little piece starting here in the next probably month or so. So that's coming forward. We actually we're getting through the Fair Avenue project there. You've seen the activity with some new curbs and concrete work, but the asphalt's going to be coming up here soon, so we're excited to get that done too. So that's it. Thanks. Sorry.
Any questions for Mr. Nolan? Okay, now you may leave.
No, not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, you have
Pay
a,
attention, pay attention.
well, get your hand up there.
Does this mean that North Columbus will still remain open, even though that Edie Road section will be closed, right?
It will remain open. It's possible that there would be reductions to like one-way traffic at times.
Okay.
So we're going to try to keep two-way traffic if we can, because there's multiple phases on how they're going to build this. The contractor hasn't submitted their MOT plan, but it's going to be phased in a three-step approach, and they're going to try to minimize that, but it'll get difficult at times, and they're going to have to shut down certain lanes and probably push it in one direction. So,
Rough guess on the amount of time that the Edie Road section will be closed?
yeah, we still haven't gotten the final schedule from the contractor, but I would say it's gonna last for the remaining part of the summer. You know, if they get started in June, by the time. This is a different project.
No, I was telling you to mention that before you
Oh, the Lomar. Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's been a long time coming as well. Sorry.
Mrs. Bobbin.
You finished his question. Is any of that gonna be night job? Is Shelley gonna work on that at night, maybe to do the paving to help on, leave the pressure of traffic?
They have not indicated night work. There will be one section that will be night work. There's a storm sewer that actually has to reach out into Memorial Drive, almost actually into the intersection of Memorial and Edie. That's gonna have to be night work. I see no other way of doing it in terms of construction,
Okay.
so,
All right.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Randall was just giving me the little, we've been working on the Magna project, so the culvert or bridge that goes into the Magna Drive, we just received word today from FEMA that the Lomar has been approved. We've been working on that project for quite some time, and so that's kind of like the final touch of closing that project out. So we should be receiving the documents from FEMA here probably next week, so we can officially, update the letter of map revision to that little section of the Upper Hockey. So, done.
Thank you, sir. Further departmental updates?
Thank you.
Seeing none, I'll defer to President Uhl for tonight's meeting prep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a couple other pieces to work our way through here, beginning with temporary resolution 55-21, a pre-annexation agreement in Hocking Township. This coming through law. Mr. Hall.
Yes, just real quickly, and I'm going to defer to Director Allum to go into detail, but this pertains to some rather welcome and important economic development on the outer belt. It doesn't preclude anything that we normally do. It's just changing the order of some of the regular business. Randall, if you could maybe provide some additional detail.
Yeah, and I'll invite Attorney Laura Comack up here, who represents the developer on this. But we've got two pieces here: temporary resolution 55-21. Which is basically an authorization to enter into a pre-annexation agreement. I don't know if you've all had a chance or whatever to go through that. We've included that in there. Kind of lays out, if you will, the roadmap for the annexation, successful annexation and development of the property. And then 5621, temporary resolution 5621 is one we've all seen before, which is, the resolution just saying that should the property, the county commissioners grant the annexation of the property into the city, that will provide services. Doing this one a little differently than others that were asking basically to, after two readings, pass these two pieces so that Ms. Comack has them in hand or whatever when she files her notice or petitions for annexation with the county commissioners. And really, the only thing that's kind of different here is, as part of this annexation agreement, I just want so everyone understands, we're agreeing to, if she's successful in her endeavors with the annexation, that we would accept it. So in a normal cycle for us on an annexation, when we get to the end, meaning the commissioners have already approved the annexation, it's gone through all its time frame, we're back here, and we're kind of getting ready to finalize the annexation, we usually do the ordinance to accept it. Right, accept the property, and then we do the ordinance with regard to the zoning. And in this particular case, we're just going to reverse those as she will be pursuing a dual path or whatever on her zoning and everything. We'll have that piece before us that night. We'll just call up and do the ordinance for the zoning first, because if that piece is not successful, then it's my understanding that that would give them hesitation as to proceeding. So with that, I'll turn it over to you to.
That's great, thanks, Ray. President, members of council, nice to see everyone. Thank you for having us back. We do have an exciting project. This is the Love's gas station going in that we've been working on for about a year. And there's a lot of really great moving parts. We think it'll be a nice development, right, particularly for that area. Because you guys know, right, where you're gonna get gas, you gotta go down to the further one at 188, and when you hang it right down to Marathon, so that's a haul. But we're very excited about it. We've been working on the project for about a year. What are we doing during that time? Figuring out the traffic, figuring out the standards, making sure that the administration and the staff likes the plans, make sure we comply. So we've had a good year. We're also worked with the county with regard to traffic and of course ODOT. So Randall has laid it out for you. Over the years when we've been doing projects, a lot of neat projects, whether it was the Edie Road that, Mitch is working on now, or the stuff to the far west in the First Ward, or the Gary Young track, or any of those. We got to evolve our process. And our purpose tonight with the pre-annexation agreement is truly a roadmap to lay out where it is that we're going. We're evolving our process so that you have transparency and that we have minimum commitments that we need for the development, meaning sewer and water. So in your pre-annexation agreement, you agree to two things. You agree to annex and you agree to provide sewer and water, plus your other utilities that the city offers. That does not mean that you're pre-approving any zoning or development. We will be going through your normal development process. So to your BZA for some minor variances on our signs, because we're freeway frontage, so just a little bit higher than normal. And we'll be going through the Planning and Zoning Commission for the actual rezoning as well. So you're not getting something that you don't see coming. Attached to your agreement are our plans and the sign package, and so you know what you're getting, and we're gonna go through the process, and if those two things marry up, it should all work out great. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. This is how we've evolved our process so that you get what you need in terms of the vision moving forward, and we'll still continue to work through so that we get the input that I think everybody likes and appreciates throughout the process.
Very good, thank you. Anyone have questions? Okay, hearing none then, this evening, Mr. Hall, what's your pleasure with this?
Would be the first of two, please.
First of two readings, and who's your second?
The second on the first resolution would be Mr. McDaniel, and the second on 5621 would be Ms. Teener.
Very good. So we're looking at 5521 and 5621 both here, and before we move on, there are no questions or concern. Okay, very good. So first of two readings, please. Thank you for being here.
Thanks very much.
Thanks
Nice
for
to
the
see you.
explanation, yes. All right, that leaves us with 5821 then, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for qualification providing utility collection service. This coming through service, Ms. Teener.
Yes, Jenny Nixon, would you like to come up and just kind of explain what you've done for the process?
Good evening. This resolution is a result of a commitment that was made back in December, I believe, through the Finance Committee. Certain, I guess, members of council were asking if the Utilities Collection Office could be privatized. So this is a resolution authorizing the Service Director to advertise for requests for qualifications for the utilities collection services.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Nixon, for being here. For questions? Ms. Teener?
I will say, I have looked through the qualifications that Jenny has put together, and with the service that we do provide the customer, I don't think that anybody probably will provide that service. So, I just kind of wondered, I don't know if anybody looked through it, but we do a lot for our customers, so.
Thank you. Further discussion?
So we are prepared and ready to do this. So we're asking for one reading tonight, Councilman President. if I see that, because we have the documents ready to go, and we would like to proceed and go forward with this. Is that okay, Councilman Diener?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will have Mr. Matlin. Yes, be my second.
Okay, so one reading tonight on temporary resolution 58-21, and again, just to clarify, all we're doing is going out and seeing what's out there. There's nothing happening here yet regarding this, we're just looking for information. Is that you, Ms. Tina? You all right over there?
Hit the microphone.
Okay.
That was a loud paper.
Thank you, Ms. Nixon, thank you for
Thank you.
being here. So one reading tonight on 58-21. With that, I don't see anything else under my meeting prep, and so I will send it back to the chairman.
Do we have a second on that? Did I miss that?
It's Jack.
It's Mr. Matley, yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, any other items for finance? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.
We have a second. We are adjourned. It is
Oh, it's 6:31.
6:31.
Wow.
The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at approximately 6:35.
Dagger Law has been part of the Lancaster community for more than 110 years. This is where we live and work. You'll see us at festivals, sporting events, and all around town. We consider our clients as friends, and we walk alongside you through challenging times. Whether you're a growing business, a changing family, facing litigation, planning your future, or dealing with land issues, we're right here. We are local. We are trusted. We are experienced. Dagger Law.
There is no place like Lancaster, Ohio, and Fairfield County, and like you, I am proud to call them home. As a longtime resident of Lancaster and graduate of Lancaster High School, this community is important to me, and I want to provide superior customer service, professionalism, integrity, and honesty at the Connor Insurance Agency. I am committed to supporting local programs and projects through my volunteer work and board membership with several organizations. It has been a great honor to work with all the first responders throughout Lancaster, Fairfield County, and the state of Ohio to put on Kids and Cops Day, to be a part of Shop with a Cop alongside the Lancaster Police Department and JFS, and to help Lancaster Public Education Foundation raise funds to support our local public schools and teachers. These men and women work hard to protect and support our community, and I would like to take this moment to say thank you for all they do. My goal as a business owner and insurance agent is to provide my clients with the most appropriate services and coverage for their needs at a competitive rate. As an independent agent, I have several carriers to choose from so I can customize your insurance coverage to fit your needs and desires. I strive to make sure there are no gaps in your coverage that could be harmful, and just as important, that you are not overinsured. I look forward to serving your insurance needs now and in the future. At Connor Insurance, we are here to serve you by protecting what is important to you. Please contact my office at 740-654-2848 for a full list of services and carriers, or visit my website, ConnorInsuranceAgency.com.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we remain thankful for your blessings and all that you do in our lives. We ask that you would continue to be with us. We ask that you would continue to be with first responders and the citizens of Lancaster. May you keep us safe. Be with us tonight as we go about the work that is set in front of us. Help us to rightly divide this and to do what is in the best interests of those who we serve. Father, continue to bless and keep us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt. Here. Mrs. Kreitz. Here. Mr. Hall. Here. Mr. James.
Here.
Mr. Matlin.
Here.
Mr. McDaniel.
Here.
Mr. Schoonover.
Here.
Mr. Stoughton. Here. And Mrs. Teener.
Here.
Let the record reflect that all 9 members of Lancaster City Council are in attendance this evening. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated April 12th, 2021.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated April 13th, 2021 regarding the Law Committee meeting agenda submitted by Assistant Law Director Stephanie Hall. Email dated April 13th, 2021 regarding Law Committee meeting agenda submitted by Mr. Hall. And finally, an email dated April 26th, 2021 regarding Finance Committee agenda submitted by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are none to be presented.
We have no special presentations or awards tonight that I'm aware of. No? Excellent. We'll move on. Are there any petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
During this time at Lancaster City Council, we set time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the city to address us on any item or issue they would like. If you're interested in addressing Lancaster City Council, please come to the podium, sign in with your name and address, and state the same for the record. Please note that members of council will not respond to you during this time, but may choose to do so at a later time during the meeting. In accordance with the rules of council, we ask that you would keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? All that for nothing? Come on, folks. All right. Thank you all for being here. Reports of standing committees.
Finance Committee meeting dated April 26, 2021, submitted by Mr. Stoughton. Public Works Committee meetings dated February 12th and April 9th, 2021, submitted by Mr. Schoonover. And finally, the Water Pollution Control meeting minutes dated April 14th, 2021, submitted by Mr. James.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
A motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the second reading of temporary resolution 48-21.
A resolution to amend permanent resolution number 131-19, authorizing the Service Safety Director to award a construction contract for the 5th, 6th Forest Row Sewer Separation Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James.
Yes, Mr. President, at this time, I would like to ask that make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 48-21.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 48-21. Discussion, Mr. James?
Briefly, this particular project has been completed and all the change orders have now been submitted, and we need to authorize, it's approximately another $110,000, I believe, to cover those change orders.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. James.
Yes, Mr. President, now I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon our written record temporary resolution numbered 48-21.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 48-21. Discussion, Mr. James?
Nothing further.
Further discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 48-21 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 49-21.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the design phase of the North Water Treatment Plant Replacement Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James?
Mr. President, this time I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 49-21.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 49-21. Discussion, Mr. James?
Just briefly, this is the opportunity for us to get the engineering rolling on the possible replacement of the North Memorial Drive water treatment plant. We had some discussion about this in the last meeting for Finance Committee, and it's about $2.2 million, and I think something we badly need.
Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. James?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon our written record temporary resolution numbered 49-21.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 49-21. Discussion, Mr. James?
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 49-21 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 50-21.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the West Sixth Avenue improvements, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. Schoonover?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 50-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 50-21. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover?
Just real quick, during the last meeting, we had discussed having 3 readings on this, but shortly after the meeting, discussed with Mr. Schonk, the engineer's office, and felt that they'd have, this meeting would give them enough time to prepare the documents to go out to bid, and we figure the faster we get that done, the faster they can start working on that project.
Thank you, Mr. Schoonover. Further discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Schoonover?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 50-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 50-21. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover?
No, sir.
Further discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 50-21 passes 9-0. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 52-21.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the Western Water Transmission Main Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James?
Just briefly, this is to take a look at the infrastructure that we might need for the development of our industrial park, and we will go with 2 readings on this.
So first of 2 readings then on temporary resolution 52-21. Temporary resolution 53-21.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Water Fund 6003 to amend the certificate with the county auditor and to approve the issuance of a then and now certificate, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution numbered 53-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 53-21. Discussion, Mr. James?
Just briefly, this is the opportunity for us to go ahead and get the contractor paid that jumped in and did something in an emergency fashion for us to repair a broken storm sewer, or excuse me, sanitary sewer. And this will just give them the opportunity to make that purchase order paid.
Thank you, Mr. James. Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. James?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion at this point that council pass, engross, and enter upon our written record temporary resolution numbered 53-21.
Ms. Teener?
I thought it was
Mr. Hall?
Oh, why does it say Teener on mine? Oh, Mr. Which one am I on?
Yeah, I'm confused.
You're on the right line, he just switched it.
We're on 53-21, right?
53 day, yeah.
He changed it.
Oh, you changed it to Mr. Hall.
Oh,
That's all you wrote.
I'm so sorry. I was
That's all
looking
right.
at the paper. A second?
Very good.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 53-21. Further discussion, Mr. James?
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 53-21 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 54-21.
A resolution to create a new fund for the local fiscal recovery fund 2052 and to set up revenue and expense accounts offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion the council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporary 5421, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 54-21. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The reason for suspension is we need to get these accounts set up sooner than later, so that if any money were to come in, we have a place to put it, at least into the ledger, by the ledger anyway. And then secondly, the city auditor is going to prepare a budget for the next meeting to be approved specific to these funds.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Stoughton. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Yes, Ms. Bobbitt?
Forgive me if you sent this in an email and I don't remember it. But since we're only setting these expenses up in parks, water, and water, does that mean that that's the only place where we're going to be able to spend those monies that we receive?
In speaking with the mayor in between meetings, he was going through and getting some more departments for lost revenues. So as he gives me those, I'll go ahead and set up those. This is just getting the establishment of the fund that's required by state audit. If we need other expense accounts, as he was saying, there's other departments that could have lost revenues, I'll add those as needed. I just wasn't aware of those at the time I did the
Okay.
message.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bobbitt. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Stoughton?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporary 5421, please.
Second.
Motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 54-21. Further discussion, Mr. Stoughton?
No, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 54-21 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 55-21.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a pre-annexation agreement covering 25.8723 plus minus acres in Hocking Township, offered by Mr. Hall, seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, this was discussed at length in finance. I'm asking for one of two, please.
Very good. First of two readings on temporary resolution 55-21, and we'll note that Attorney Comack is here, and thank you for being here, ma'am. We are excited about this project and appreciate your presence tonight. Temporary resolution 56-21. I'm sorry?
I actually had a question for Randall.
You had a question for Randall on 55-21?
And 50, let's see, yeah, 55 and 56, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, let's do it in 56 since we're past 55, and we'll get there. Temporary Resolution 56-21.
A resolution indicating services to be provided by the municipal corporation to 25.8723 plus minus acres in Hocking Township, offered by Mr. Hall and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. Hall,
Yes, one of two, please.
first of two readings on Temporary Resolution 56-21. I suppose we can pause here if you would have a question, Ms.
Yes,
Teener.
is there a reason that we couldn't do this in one reading and suspend on this? Is there, because we had quite a discussion at our law committee meeting on both of these. And with that, I didn't know if we could do that.
Yeah, actually, Chairman Hall, I spoke of it. We've always talked about 2 meetings, but I'm sure, the sooner you take action and you're comfortable with it, that pre-annexation agreement is quite lengthy, so I just wanted to make sure everybody had an opportunity to review that, get comfortable with, have any questions. But by all means, I know she wouldn't object because that just speeds up the process that she can file her notice of petition for annexation with the county commissioners that much sooner. So I will leave that up to you all.
Okay. A discussion probably better had prior to us moving past the first reading of these. Nevertheless, the city council can act however they would choose, and if there is an appetite to suspend on these and move forward, we can do so. We can just make a motion and move forward at this point, I believe, Mr. Stoughton.
Yeah, so I'll just offer a little color to this. So when I first started on city council, we suspended and passed on quite a few things. And then we had people come in, different people get elected and feel like that everything needed to go a full 3 readings. So this is why we get caught in this game of suspended versus not suspending. A lot of our work is, believe it or not, 96% of our legislation passes unanimously, at least on in my terms. That encompasses over 3,500 pieces of pieces of legislation, just FYI. But to give you some color to this, when I first started in 2004, 71% of our resolutions passed on first reading. Last year, it was 56%, and then the low mark was 21% in 2013. So I just want to share with you why, we talk about readings. Again, a lot of this is just mundane stuff that we're trying to dispense of. So I don't disagree with you, to be honest with you.
At the end of the day, Ms. Teener seems surprised there.
It's Monday.
Well, and, I think the other thing to consider as we look at this legislation as well is that there's no property owners probably around that are going to have issue, and not to mention the fact that this is only a pre-annexation agreement. There's plenty of process left down the road, and so, Law Director, I don't know if you want to add additional color to why this.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, at this stage and what we're doing at this point is, is basically putting a pin in it at the beginning. Notice to property owners, all that stuff will be a process that happens throughout the county commissioners process, I should say. And then, we'll then follow that along to us when we're looking at this sort of, if you will, on the back end of it, and looking to actually, annex in the property, create the zoning for the property once it's annexed into the city, that sort of thing, so.
Okay. Ms. Bobbitt.
I would just like to add, since, maybe the viewing public is watching, and they were not watching possibly during finance, as it was stated, this still, once we even go through this process, the process will continue as on, and they'll go through the BZA, and they'll also go to the Planning Commission to rezone. So, it really is a pre-annexation, and I have no problem tonight if we want to suspend.
Okay, any further discussion around the table? The president has the opportunity to go outside of the regular order of business if there's no objection from anyone on the council floor, and so if there was a motion to suspend on going back to 55-21, we could entertain that at this point without objection.
I make a motion that we return to temporary resolution number 5521.
Second.
Well, so I think we can just do it, and I think we just need a motion to approve or not from the sponsor of the legislation.
So we just start again? And
Yeah,
it's
pretty much.
suspended, right?
We're popping
Okay.
back to 55-21.
You all didn't do a
So-
motion on the first one anyhow, you just said first of 2 readings.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, there's nothing.
So,
Throwing it at you.
So,
So
Mr.
if there's not
President,
objection and the sponsor is interested in making a motion to suspend and try to pass tonight, we can do that. Mr. Hall?
yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of ordinance resolution temporarily numbered 55-21.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 55-21. Is there discussion on the motion to suspend?
Not at this time.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution 55-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 55-21. Discussion, Mr. Hall.
No, not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 55-21 does pass 9-0. We can now return to temporary resolution 56-21. Would you like to make a motion? It's been read, Mr. Hall.
I would, yes. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution 56-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 56-21. Discussion, Mr. Hall?
No, not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Hall.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 56-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 56-21. Mr. Hall, any discussion?
Nope.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 56-21 passes 9-0. Mr. Ullum, what is it that I don't like? Surprises, right? We talked about it a little while ago. I don't like surprises. Ms. Teener, when you have a great idea like this, if we could do it in finance when we prepare that.
Well, I didn't think about it till later.
I understand. It's great. I'm more happy to move forward with the project. It's just turned into a big old thing here, so we got through it. All right, temporary resolution 57-21.
A resolution to approve an enterprise zone agreement with Blue Label Packaging Company doing business as Blue Label Digital Printing and One Right Company, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Mr. Stoughton,
President
do
Rule.
it. Do it.
First reading, Mr. President.
All right, first reading on temporary resolution 57-21. Temporary resolution 58-21.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise a request for qualifications for providing utility collection services for the city of Lancaster, offered by Mrs. Teener and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mrs. Teener.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 58-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 58-21. Discussion, Ms. Teener?
Not this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Ms. Teener.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 58-21.
Second.
Motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 58-21. Discussion, Ms. Teener?
Yes, this is just to go out for qualifications for utilities collections to see if maybe there's another place out there that would do the billing cheaper. But with the qualifications that we do have, the service that our utilities collections provides, I don't know that we will find that. But it's just going out to check, nothing other than that.
Thank you, Ms. Teener. Further discussion on the motion to pass? Yes, Mr. Stoughton?
Yeah, this was, I just want to set the record straight here. This was something that the mayor committed to doing. Just want to be clear. In a finance committee meeting that we had back in November and December. So my understanding is there are some folks on council that are, I think, being falsely accused. So I just want to be clear. This was a commitment made by the mayor to do this, not a commitment by anyone on council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stoughton. Any further discussion on the motion to pass? Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 58-21 passes 9-0. Are there any other resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move to the reading of ordinances, beginning with the second reading of Temporary Ordinance 11-21.
An ordinance of the City of Lancaster to repeal and replace existing Lancaster Codified Ordinance, Part 13, Building Code, Chapter 1303, Technical Codes, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Hall and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, as discussed in our previous city council meeting, we have a series of ordinances that need to be passed to bring our code into alignment with existing standards. I'm going to ask Law Director Allam if it pleases the council to discuss all four of those ordinances at once so that we can preserve a little bit of time.
Thank you. Mr. Owen?
Thank you, President Uhl. I think the best way to encapsulate this, for those of you who have been around for a while, you know that there's certain codes, like the state building code, things like that, that we just adopt by reference. We don't create our own within the codified ordinances. So, and of course, there's amendments and revisions that get made to those, and so we do our best to keep up with the current versions of those. So in 1121, before you right now is, of course, the building code, technical codes. 1221 will be the International Property Maintenance Code, just taking us to the most current version. The fire code is for 1321. And we just make some minor revisions in there with regard to making it specific to us and referencing Lancaster Fire and the fire chief rather than the fire marshal. And then really 1421 is the only one that's a little different than what you're used to seeing. What we used to regulate swimming pools was actually an appendix to the building code, but it's my understanding that they've changed that, they've taken it out, but we like those particular rules and regulations with regard to swimming pools. So that one we have decided that we are adopting over into the codified ordinances so that we can keep that, even though it may have changed or whatever at the state level. So take any questions if you have them, but that's in a nutshell.
Thank you, Law Director Ullem. Does anyone have any questions or further discussion or comment? Yes, Ms.
Just
Bob.
a comment. Thank you and thank Mr. Davis for all your work. Because, you know, just like here with the swimming pools, you saw that, you know, it was different and this was needed. So I know it's I know it's your job, but it's a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? Yeah, that's no problem. All right, so we have a motion on the floor, motion to suspend, correct?
Not yet.
You haven't made that motion yet?
I have not.
Okay.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 11-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 11-21. Is there further discussion on the motion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Hall.
Yes, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 11-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 11-21. Any discussion, Mr. Hall?
Nope.
Discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 11-21 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 12-21.
An ordinance of the City of Lancaster adopting the 2021 edition of the International Property Maintenance Code regulating the conditions and maintenance of all property, buildings, and structures, and repealing and replacing existing Lancaster codified ordinance 1303.01D and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Hall and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 12-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 12-21. Discussion, Mr. Hall.
Not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 12-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 12-21. Discussion, Mr. Hall?
No, not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 12-21 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 13-21.
An ordinance of the City of Lancaster to repeal and replace existing Lancaster codified ordinance 1525.01 adoption and 1525.02 amendments of Part 13 Fire Prevention Code of the codified ordinances of the City of Lancaster and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Hall and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 13-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 13-21. Mr. Hall, discussion?
Not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 13-21.
We
Second.
have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 13-21. Discussion, Mr. Hall?
Not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 13-21 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 14-21.
An ordinance of the City of Lancaster to repeal and replace existing Lancaster codified ordinance 1125.05 private swimming pools of the codified ordinances of the City of Lancaster and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Hall, seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 14-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 14-21. Discussion, Mr. Hall?
Not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 14-21.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 14-21. Discussion, Mr. Hall?
Nope.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 14-21 passes 9-0. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council? All right, very good. We'll then move on to, there's no tabled legislation. We'll move on to unfinished business. Does anyone have unfinished business they'd like to discuss this evening? Does anyone have any new business they'd like to discuss this evening? Mr. Stoughton?
I have a question about building permits and code enforcement. So I'm just going to, we all know that what I'm talking about. We have a property in my neighborhood that's almost heading towards 2 years, making some progress on the piece now, but there's 2 more phases to this thing. And so the question I have, and I don't know the answer, is why I'm asking, and maybe it's something that maybe needs to go through committee, but it's kind of disingenuous of the person that's wanting to do the upgrade of their home to take 2 years to do a single piece. But the other part to that is all the supplies and materials are laying on their front porch, laying in their driveway, laying at the side of their house. All right, and it's almost like I think this building permit gives them, gives them a free pass on things that are typically problematic through code enforcement. So I'm asking the administration, and maybe I'm asking the law director, I don't know the answer to this question. Help me understand, why that would be okay under a building permit, especially one that's taken this long to finish the first of 3 phases. So I'll defer to you.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if I can answer all your questions right now, and it's something we can definitely look into further. But unfortunately, with building permits, once issued, they have some time to them, and the person also has the option through the law to, renew those a few times. So unfortunately, if someone is not vigorously pursuing their project, it can draw out for a while. But at the same time, I do understand, or whatever, that that can, depending on how long it's drawn out, can have an ill effect on others' peaceful enjoyment, if you will, of their home. So it's something that currently, right now, unfortunately, what's going on near you is, for all intent and purposes or whatever, allowable. I don't know, and within my office, we're trying to explore if there's some, if there's some solution to that, to actually sort of appease everyone, so that you don't have these projects that go on ad nauseum for years and years and years. And to my understanding, in your situation, the person buys in bulk and has pallets dropped off, and a weekend warrior kind of project. So I understand the situation. There's no immediate fix, but we're looking to see if.
Well, I guess my question, and you may know this, Mary, you know an awful lot about building, but is it because we have a certified building department that we can't change our local ordinance to address these things?
Well, I would say with that, I mean, we just adopted, kind of the state building code. We just did that in the legislation that we had before you. So what we'd have to do is look to somehow alter that, which, I mean, the argument against it, of course, is uniformity. I mean, to be honest with you, the discussion we're having probably needs to be had maybe in the state legislature versus here, just because, communities and, developers and things like that are looking for uniformity. So, when I don't necessarily advise communities to go sort of rogue, if you will, and, have a lot of different rules. I hate to say it. I mean, I know what your frustration is with your particular issue. I'm sure there's others that are having it, but at the end of the day, the question might be something that's more of a state legislature question with regard to the state building code, and maybe having some more restrictions, or that if a person hasn't made any progress or whatever in a project, they're not entitled to an extension, I don't necessarily know, to be honest with you, why the timeframes are what they are right now anyhow. I mean, a year seems a real long time to me. When you come in for a building permit, I would think that you know what you want to build, and you kind of have the project laid out, and you know what it is you want to do, and hopefully you've got the money to finance it. But that may not be something we can solve locally, but.
Well, let me throw you a curveball specific to this particular property. My understanding is we're thinking about an in-ground swimming pool now. Can you have do you need a building permit for a swimming pool?
You know what? I don't know that as I see here right now, I would think that there would have to be a separate permitting process for that, but please don't hold me to it. I'd have to talk to the folks that wade through that code every single day, which I do not, thank the good Lord. But, yeah, a swimming pool, huh? That's,
Can you have two open building permits on the same property at the same time?
that's another good question. I don't necessarily know the answer to that off the
You
top
know,
of my head.
I like being married, I really do. A lot.
Does she?
Well, that's a whole different animal for a whole different bunch of reasons. Well, let me just, and then I'm going to get off this, I'm going to stop beating this dead horse here. But is there anything that can be put within the code enforcement ordinances that will at least help having to deal with just the unsightliness of the property based on the pace in which the renovations occur?
I can't definitively answer your question now, but what I will say is my recollection, we've done some legal research within the office on this. I apologize, I haven't. I had one of my associates do it, but I want to say what they were telling me is that case law is sort of fraught with communities that have tried to basically excise greater things out of this process, and they've basically lost in that regard when they went up to the state level or whatever. So I'm not giving you a definitive answer on that. Like I said, we can explore it, but I'm concerned. I think your solution, you need to buy your wife a new house. I mean, I think is what you need to do. That's the short answer to your problem, Councilman Stoughton.
Yeah, good luck selling it with all that stuff out front.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I understand, I mean, even, Mr. Davis said, there's just a handful of these types of things each year. Most people that put in a permit do exactly what they say they're going to do. I mean, my only concern is we've got two more phases to this project. I have two neighbors, one next to them and one behind, that, are as, concerned about the next two phases and a swimming pool as I am. So I'm just saying, and there may be nothing we can do.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to explore it further to see if there's some relief or whatever that we can generate.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You could ask for a season pass to the pool.
That's a good idea, start charging.
That's a good.
His problem is it'll never get built.
Sell some concessions in the backyard.
Concessions.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Stoughton, thank you, Mr. Ullum. Yes, Ms. Bobbitt?
I would like to mention that this past Saturday, there was over 130 volunteers in downtown Lancaster. They came out with their shovels, their gloves on, and they did a lot of work. When you drive down Main Street, you'll see all that nice black mulch that was donated by Kirkbrides. I know that they had at least 20 employees there, and that was all donated by them. I mean, it was, and they had many trucks there. I'd hate to total up how much money they had in equipment in our downtown Lancaster, but I want to, thank them for all that they do. They do take care of the contract for DDL, for destination downtown during the winter. But, this was something over and above what they did for us, so I want to thank them. I also want to mention the 130 volunteers, thank them, and then want to thank Brad Hutchinson, because he purchased lunch for every one of the workers that came out. That was nice.
Very
At
nice.
lunch in one of the downtown restaurants.
Right.
It was a great day.
It was a great day, and we had soccer, and so as we were driving through, we saw the 130 people and all the stuff happening, and when we came back through, it was all cleaned up and done, and it looks very, very nice. So thanks to Kirkbride and to all those volunteers and to Brad who donated so much during that. I'll just jump on that with some comments about them the rest of the day. The mayor and Paul, and Mr. James I saw was out there, and many others were at the Seeds of Change event at Rising Park, where not only was there an Earth Day, Arbor Day event that took place with a bunch of community partners, but also then we hiked ourselves all the way up that hill. All the way up the hill. I think it was worse than the mountain. And cut the ribbon at the new Lancaster City Arboretum. And it was a beautiful thing, and we know, and it was made very public, that a particular donor, Bob Bainter, had donated significantly to make that come to fruition, as well as many other people who bought trees and made donations. And so congratulations to Lancaster Parks and Rec and to all that were involved in that event. It was indeed a very great day on Saturday all the way around. Other new business today. Okay. If not, then we'll ask that the clerk read our announcement of scheduled meetings.
Upcoming meeting, the next meeting is May 10th. The meeting following is May 24th, both meetings 6:30 PM here in council chambers. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Safety, May 7th at 7:30 AM at the City Hall 1897 Conference Room. Finance, May 10th, 6 PM here in council chambers. Water pollution control, May 12th at 8 AM at the City Hall 1897 Conference Room. Law Committee, May 12th at 9:30 AM at the City Hall 1897 Conference Room. Economic Development, May 20th at 7:30 AM, City Hall 1897 Conference Room. And finally, Finance, May 24th at 6 PM here in council chambers.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There are none to be presented.
Is there a need for an executive session? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I would like to make that motion to adjourn.
And I'd like to second that.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all very much. Please remember to sign your legislation. We are adjourned. Have a great night.